Hello, my name is Precious Vines Harris, and I am the Single Maven. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, I'm going to review episode 7 of the Later Dater series entitled Take That In. I do apologize. It has taken me a few weeks to get back to reviewing the last 2 episodes, but we're going to finish it up this week, and now I'm going to review episode 7. So we begin episode 7 with Suzanne. Suzanne has gone out on 2 dates. 3 dates really, and the last date she went out with someone named Jeff, and we find out that Jeff is her opposite. He's more introverted. Suzanne is more extroverted, so she's kind of on the fence about that, and she's telling her children about him and his personality and not knowing necessarily if they're going to mesh well. So we kind of have to see how that's going to turn out for her. And I've mentioned this before. I think Suzanne is on the fence about dating in general because she was married for so long and her husband is deceased. And I think a lot of times she's comparing her dates to her deceased husband. So they're kind of living in her husband's not ex-husband, but deceased husband's shadow. So I think that's part of the issue that she has as it relates to dating. We're going to move next to Anise. And I'm kind of going to jump around because this being a documentary series, you will find out that they kind of do like different episodes or part of the episodes, different sections of the episode with each character. So we're going to move to Anise next, and we see her meeting up with the dating coach, Logan. So Logan wants to see if Anise has changed since the beginning of the process. And we do find that she is. I do have some epiphanies that I think are going to be pertinent to this specific episode, this episode and the last episode as it relates to Anise. Anise relays her date with Willie, and I pretty much talked about that in the last review of episode 6, that there was definite chemistry with them. She talks about the sparks that they shared. They kind of talk about how she thinks that Willie is, I wouldn't say somewhat of a player, but he is a very attractive man. So in my notes, I kind of have here that she says that when you're dating a very attractive man, sometimes they're dating around because they have that option to do so. And I do think that's true. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all approach, but I do think that you should recognize if you are dating someone that is attractive, they may be dating multiple people and they may have more than one option, right? And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, and I've said this before, you should date more than one person, especially if you're thinking about the fact that you actually want to settle down and get married. I'm not saying go crazy with it, but do keep your options open. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? She says that you really have to consider that when you're actually dating someone that may be attractive, because it's kind of like a kid in a candy store. And she kind of gives that analogy. Also, she talks about her being her whole self now. And I find that to be one of the biggest epiphanies that I have with this entire series, is the fact that Anise comes full circle. Or maybe, I wouldn't say maybe full circle, depends upon how you look at it. But it's a full circle moment in that she is actually becoming self-aware of her coming into her own, embracing who she fully is and loving herself. And I think that I do have here, when dating, sometimes you can shrink yourself to minimize yourself, thinking that you have to be less than to be accepted. And Anise has kind of talked about that in the regard that she has different degrees, and sometimes she doesn't necessarily know how she comes off to people she may be dating because they may be intimidated by her. So she's well accomplished, and I think sometimes that does actually play a part in the dating process overall. But I do have here that doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. I do feel that you as a person can match with any type of person regardless of their specific socioeconomic status, their education, background, all of that. But you do have to be aware of that person being accepting of you, them being comfortable in their own skin, actually owning themselves and not being insecure, right? And you being secure in who you are. So I think with Anise, she's able to actually bring her whole self to the dating process now. And that was something she was not able to do before. So I really see, out of all of the later daters, that she probably had the most growth. So I am excited for her about that process. And that's probably one of the things that I would say as far as advice goes is bringing your whole self to the dating process and not being afraid to learn and grow, not just necessarily seeing going at dating as to how can I actually get a man or how can I actually get married, but how can I actually grow and develop into a better version of myself as I make this journey through dating, right? So I do have here that you have to recognize that showing up as your whole self completely as you are and not dumbing yourself down is important, right? Your person is going to be your person and they're going to accept you for who you are, regardless of, looking at comparisons between education or money. Not saying those things are not important. They are important, right? But that's not your whole identity. Your whole identity is not your degree status. How many degrees do I have? How much money do I have in my bank account? Those are parts or facets of your identity, but that's not your whole identity. So I think that's something to be mindful of when you're looking at dating, right? I do have here that you don't necessarily know the real person until you spend time with them on a regular basis. I think that's important too, because in the beginning of the dating process, like the people say, everybody's bringing their representative, but you're not necessarily seeing that person in different levels or different layers of an environment, different seasons in their life. You have to get to know that person in all parts of their life, right? So that's important as well. And I do have here, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, is how you adjust yourself to get to know someone. And I'll put a paper clip there. Because I think that when I get to Lori, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, right? Let's see if I have any more notes on Anise. Yeah, I do have also that she's 62 years old, and age is just a number as it relates to learning, because you can learn and grow at any age, right? If you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, and you're thinking about going out in the dating process, it's like any other goal that you have in your life. You have to be willing to set aside any preconceived notions, any fears, anxieties, things that maybe have held you back in the past from you getting to your goal, right? Don't allow the dating process to only be about finding the one. The dating process can be more than just that, right? It can be about you finding you finding yourself in the process of someone finding you. And I'll say that again. The dating process can be also about you finding yourself in the process of someone finding you. So I think that's important to look at. So Anise really is embracing the fullness of who she is at 62. And I say kudos to her for doing that, finding herself, because that's not necessarily something a lot of people would do. A lot of people would not necessarily put themselves on a dating show or reality show or something to document their lives. But to be able to do dating in front of a camera on a regular basis and learning about yourself and epiphanies and sharing it with others, I think is phenomenal, right? I also have here learning how to love yourself and be self-aware and treat yourself with decency and respect and boundaries is something that we all can learn even at an older age. And I think she actually exhibited that in this process of dating, right? And I have here also, at the end of the day, if you're looking for love and haven't learned to love yourself, what are you really doing, right? That's something to think about, ladies. If you're actually dating and you're looking for love, but you actually have not learned to love yourself, what are you doing in the process? Because at the end of the day, self-love is important, right? Self-love is important. You have to be able to love yourself before you can actually love someone else, all right? So I'm going to go on to Greg. Just making a note here. All right, so we were introduced to Greg later in the series, maybe episode 5 or 6. We found out he's 61. He has 2 adult sons. One has cerebral palsy. He went on a date with Kelly. Kelly is from Metro Atlanta, and I think there was the issue with the drive. She was maybe an hour and a half away, so he stated at the end he wasn't necessarily interested in her. So he was ready to move on to date number 2. We find out he goes on date number 2, And I think that that person's name is Sherry. So we find out Sherry is 60, divorced 3 times, 13 years single, 2 kids. So my first inclination when it kind of shows Sherry coming up to the building for the date, I was like, I think Sherry is more of a type A personality, right? She's very put together. She looks like she could probably be a college professor, something of that nature. She has glasses, bob, or whatever. She has like a little wrap or whatever. And she said she's looking for someone to make her heart go pitter patter like when she was younger. So I find that interesting. She's looking for love, right? Greg says his first impression of her was great. He loved her smile. And Sherry shares that she adopted 2 children. One, I think, is 21 from Guatemala, and one is 17 from Ethiopia. And they're both girls. Sherry says that her first impression of Greg is he looked really cute. And she said something like he looked like Kelvin Klein, the actor. I Googled it. I didn't really see the semblance. Maybe I can kind of see it, but I didn't really see it that much. But at any rate, Greg says he noticed that she has a quiet side, so he kept telling himself to come down and go slow. I commend Greg for actually being self-aware on the date, and that's something that you have to be aware of is, like people say, read the room. You have to read your date. You have to be able to gather information to see what nonverbal cues they're giving off. Are they nervous? What type of personality is this person? So you can adjust yourself based upon the energy that they're giving off, right? So I do like that. I think it's important to be self-aware on a date, right? Now, as they got to talking, they realized that Sherry is more worldly. She was sharing some of the places she's been. Greg didn't know what she was talking about. He seemed more country, and she seemed more worldly, right? So I kind of get from the gist of that conversation, they're not necessarily a match per se. And he says that he wouldn't mind going out on another date with Sherry, but he doesn't know if she's interested. She says that she doesn't think that they are a match. So they kind of end at that point of them not really necessarily seeing a match per se, right? Now, if I was Sherry, I would probably give him another chance. That's just for the fact of, I feel like the first date is kind of a tester. The second date is, okay, let me just gather more information about you to see if this is something that can go a little bit further. But I get it. If you have a strong gut feeling, maybe she did that they don't match, then she was like, okay, cool. I'm moving forward. Because sometimes opposites do attract, but you have to recognize how much of an opposite that you would be able to be attracted to. I think considering she has children from different countries, she's talked about traveling to different places. He didn't even know what some of those places was that she was talking about. So I feel like, hey, they probably wouldn't necessarily match that much. So at any rate, we're moving on to Nate now. So Nate, his daughter and his ex girlfriend Jackie gearing up for a cookout. We see them over there. He's telling about his dates, and he says that he's finally made a decision who he wants to go out on a second date with. So you kind of see that he went through 3 dates, and now he's trying to figure out who he wants to go out on a second date with. I said that I felt like Nate should kind of be more forthcoming in what he or how he actually presented himself to say, you know what, okay, I like you, let's go out on a second date. I don't like you. But he kind of took his time. I mean, it's okay if you want to do that. I just feel like, for me, I probably would have hopped on it a little bit faster. But at any rate, he says that he is finally picking that person. We're going to find out later who that second date is. And it's going to be interesting because I watched episode 8 and I was like, I got a lot to talk about with that. Now we're going to move on to Suzanne again. So we kind of come back to her, and she does invite Jeff out on a second date, right? This is the one that is a little bit more opposite of her personality. She's more extroverted. He's more introverted. So they go out on her boat. They do actually kiss, so I find it interesting. And it looks like she could be adjusting to the possibility of matching with someone that is her opposite, but we'll see how that works out, right? And then we have, going back to Greg, that we see that Logan meets with Greg to go over his second date with Sherry. So After he talks with Logan, he realizes that he may have been premature in his assessment of his date with, I think Kelly, when he was saying about the distance. Um, and I think that he shares his online dating profile with Logan, and they kind of go over some pointers, right? Because he's over 50, and she kind of says like these are some of the things that people do that it shouldn't necessarily do. They kind of talk about the difference between the boomer generation and the millennial generation, right? And also they kind of talk about how to navigate online dating, right? And how to be open to different ways of meeting people. They do talk about that as well. So I do think my takeaway from this specific scene is the fact that you have to be open to multiple ways of meeting people. If you have tried online dating before, try a different site, try a different method, right? Or just different ways of actually going about how you present yourself. I think it's important. You can just really try online dating with a different site, or actually upload different pictures. Get some help with your profile. But look at it in such a way that you're not necessarily discrediting how you can meet someone, right? Because you could approach something that you've approached before in a different way and have a potential different result, right? They continue the conversation about him being premature, about his assessment of Kelly and the distance, which I just talked about. She did ask him, did he make that assumption because he was scared? He said no, he may have just jumped the gun because of the distance. So one thing I think to say is to keep your options open. Don't necessarily discredit something because it may look like it can't or could not work. But as it turns out, we found out that he reaches out to Kelly and she's kind of moved on. So that door is really closed for him, right? Now we're going to move on to Lori. Now, Lori, to be honest with you, out of all of the people, she probably needs the most help, right? We find out it's the day of her birthday party. She's disappointed that Felton, remember the guy that she really likes, that hasn't really been giving her the feedback that she wants. She's disappointed that he's not going to be there at the party, but she invited Martin, which was her last date. I kind of like Martin, right? We find out, at her birthday party, she's having fun. Martin comes in. He had a great presentation. He had a big bouquet of flowers, and he brought her a gift, which was the candles that they made at the first date, right? I thought that was super sweet. I like Martin, right? He came bearing gifts. He wished her happy birthday. He met some of her friends. But then Lori starts to lose me because her and Martin sit down on the couch, and she starts to act a little strange. Now, I think she's already mentioned this before, that she may not necessarily be feeling Martin, she's feeling Felton. But you remember, Martin is, I think he's either studying to be a deacon or he's about to be ordained to be a deacon or something like that. But they go to the same church. So I think in Lori's head, she says, "Ooh, I curse too much." So I think she's thinking they're not necessarily a match, right? She loses me when she sits down with Martin and he kind of asks her if they can go to a more intimate setting. And I'm thinking he's saying it because he wants to talk to her just for a few minutes or whatever, not saying taking her talent away from her birthday party. But he's trying to let her know that he's interested in her, right? But Lori is not really looking at him in the eye. She seems like she's not interested. She doesn't answer him. Then she goes on to say that it's her birthday party and she's on the move. She's on the mix and mingle. And I'm thinking, that's kind of rude. Number one, you chasing behind Felton. Felton don't like he thinking about you, Lori, okay? Martin is actually a nice guy. He's a Christian. He goes to your church. He's trying to be a deacon. He comes to your birthday party. He brings you a big bouquet of flowers. He brings you a gift from your first date. He knows you loves candles. So I'm thinking in my mind, like, why not get to know Martin a little bit better? Because at the end of the day, you're counting him out before you even give him a chance to actually get to know him. They only went out on one date, right? So I don't necessarily like her response, right? I don't know if she was trying to be off-putting because she just wasn't interested, or she was taken aback because he was saying, can we go to a more intimate setting? And it was the middle of her birthday party. She's trying to entertain people. Either way you look at it, I didn't necessarily like her response, right? I think she should have responded differently, and I think she should have gave him more time because he's actually looking like he's wanting to get to know you a little bit better, right? And I think she could have approached it from the standpoint of, oh, well, we might not necessarily be able to go to a more intimate setting now, but I'm definitely interested in potentially meeting up with you maybe tomorrow or later on this evening because I want to make sure that I entertain my guests. Yes, she could have said something to that nature. We kind of see Martin hang around a little bit after they have that awkward conversation, and then he kind of leaves the party. And I felt bad for Martin because I feel like Martin could probably be a good catch for someone. She didn't give him a chance. And I think Lori is not aware to the fact of the energy that she puts off to people. And I don't know, I don't really have this in my notes, but it makes me think sometimes I think the longer you are single, you get, I don't want to say a heart and shell, but you get more set in your ways where you don't necessarily see where you lose the feminine energy, you lose the ability sometimes to be self-aware of how you come across. And if you have a strong personality, if you're more extroverted or have a strong personality in general, you don't necessarily see how you could be blocking your own blessings based upon your response to other people. Lori's children chime in and give a little bit of input, right? Lori's children say that they don't think that she will be a match with him because she has a bold personality, right? And then also they say that she doesn't necessarily know how to let down her guard and be aware of the fact that she's put into people that could be interested in her and maybe worth getting to know them a little bit better, right? And also, the producers asked Lori's children what kind of man does her mom need, and they say they don't even know. And I thought to myself, well, if the kids don't know, who knows? Because they should know you. They should know you well, right? Her son was scratching his head like he was confused. So I think the sad part is they realize that mom needs to do a little bit more work, but I don't even think they think that she's really willing to put in the work and effort that is needed to get in a relationship. She says she want to be in a relationship, I think, within like a year or two. And I'm thinking in my mind, Laura, how you going to do that when you pushing people away and chasing a man that don't want you? But I digress. So, I talked about that. I'm going to move on to Anise and Willie. Anise and Willie go out on a second date, people. Now, I'm not going to be funny. Anise and Willie have some strong sexual chemistry. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, right? I do think you have to monitor it in the fact that you can't let chemistry or attraction be so premature in your thinking this is the one, right? Because that can be there, and it's not saying you should not be sexually attracted or attracted to someone, right? At the end of the day, you should be attracted to someone you're dating or someone you're interested in, but don't let that attraction or sexual chemistry or whatever you want to call it be like the leading guide into whether this is the person for you. Because at the end of the day, you have to have more than that, right? So Anise and Willie go on a date in nature. They're walking. I think they're doing like a nature trail of some sort and having lunch out in nature. And we find out that Willie still does not know. I don't know why he want to call her Anise Patrice or whatever. Her name is Anise Patricia. At any rate, he's still trying to figure out her name. And I'm like, Willie, do she need to wear a name tag? Okay. So we kind of see that. And I don't have notes here that we continue. I think maybe on episode 8, we finish up with Anise and a date. So we kind of see how they start off and flirting and they're kind of kissing or whatever. And then it kind of jumps from that. I think they finished the date in episode 8. So let me give my takeaways for episode 7. First and foremost, number 1 I have, don't ever put all of your eggs in one basket. This goes back to my notion of not dating only one person and saying this is the one without getting to know other people. Unless you're exclusive with someone and in an exclusive relationship, I feel like keep it moving. Keep your options open. Pray about everything. Be safe, but don't pigeonhole yourself because you're thinking, oh, this could be the guy, but he may be dating other people too, right? Make sure you cast your net wide and don't be afraid to date more than one person. Broaden your perspective on who your ideal match could be. because you never know where your opportunities are. In addition to that, I have, secondly, be consistent. The more consistent you are in dating, the better. You get more opportunities to find people that mesh well with you. As we saw in this process with the later daters, as we move forward, the dating process got better for everyone, right? But it actually helps boost your confidence in the process, especially if you were like a little bit nervous about it. Being able to keep your options open does boost your confidence. And then lastly, I have always remember to be respectful in your communication and interaction with people. That kind of goes to what I was talking about with Lori and also with Greg somewhat. I think he was able to kind of catch himself in how he came across to Kelly in his response with her. But I think that he self-corrected earlier. Lori's still not necessarily self-correcting, right? I do also have that she's continued to make the same mistakes she made in the beginning, and I don't see where she's opening herself up to the possibility to learn that maybe she really is part of the problem as to why she's still single, right? Or friend zone. That was one thing she talked about in the beginning. I also have that sometimes if you put yourself in the driver's seat to be super aggressive and actually leave out potential people that could be a potential match because you're putting all your eggs in one basket, aka her with Felton, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Don't do that. Don't actually put boundaries and borders around something that the other person hasn't. Don't chase that person. If they ain't chasing you, baby, don't chase them. I'm going to be real with you. This is one of the things I think people mess up on is the fact that when you see someone that's not interested in you, take their word for it, take their actions for it, and move on because you're chasing them, they're not chasing you, and you're wasting time. Okay? So that is my review of episode 7. Take that in with the later daters. I do encourage you, if you've not done so, to watch my other reviews, episodes 1 through 6. You can find the later daters on Netflix. And I encourage you, if you've not done so, to like and subscribe to my channel and continue to follow me as I post more in episode 8, the final review of the later dater series. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time.